I just make a couple of comments. Somewhere along the way, after I left USDA, I lost my way and went into the motion picture industry for a while. And there's a famous movie that many in the crowd, I'm sure, have seen. The movie is called The Graduate. And in that movie, Dustin Hoffman is a college graduate and doesn't quite know what to do. And his prospective father-in-law comes to him and he says one word. He says, "There's one word." And then Dustin says, "What is that?" And he said, "Plastics." Remember that? Okay. Well, actually, today the word is agriculture and food. Look at where we are economically. We have the highest farm income in history. We have the highest exports in history. We have the highest cash income in history. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't problems, there isn't a drought, and there aren't challenges, which there are. But I think what this recognizes is over the long term, agriculture and food is poised to be a very dominant industry in America, unlike where it's been in many years in the past. So I really think that's something that's exciting for anybody who's in this business. The second thing, you talked about the Morrill Act, 1862. Imagine this. In the midst of the Civil War, in the midst when the country was being torn apart, the founding fathers, the members of Congress, and Abraham Lincoln, when the bullets were flying and the battles were being raged, passed this profound legislation, the Homestead Act. They passed the Morrill Act. They passed the whole system to deal with the land-grant college. They changed America when times were really bad. It's a good lesson for us as Americans as we look at all of our problems today that, we can work together to get things done, like my friend Mike Johans does in the Senate today when he works on farm legislation. We don't have to be at our throats all the way. And the lesson of the 1862 law ought to be a good lesson for us in the year 2012.
I think a perfect place to start tonight is with the Morrill Act. It changed our nation, if you think about it. But I also think about Abraham Lincoln during that time, and Dan laid it out so well. Tough time in our nation's history. Our country was torn apart. But he had such confidence in the future of this country. And he passed this legislation, and it created the land-grant university system. At the same time, the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, also encouraged and then signed a piece of legislation called the Homestead Act. And we recently celebrated the anniversary of the Homestead Act. Now, if you look around the world at that point in time, the model would have been that the government owned the land and that people lived on the land and served the government. Abraham Lincoln had a different vision for our nation. And that vision was that literally, if you wanted to go out and homestead, you could own that land. And it totally changed the United States. And it established in our country a free enterprise system. So as we talk tonight about agriculture and its future and where it's come from, I think one thing we need to keep in mind is that this vision of Abraham Lincoln, which created our free enterprise system really at the ground level, is a vision that we need to protect. It's a vision that we need to think about. When Jack talks about the regulations and the overpowering power of the federal government, it is just so important to keep in mind that we have to give the individual the ability to succeed and fail in our policies. And I think that's what brings us here tonight when you think about those important pieces of legislation.